A local agency panel. I'd like to call up, in addition to Todd, Trudy Elsnor, Pat Connor, Steve Branaau, and Duane Ratermann. Have agreed to serve on a local agency panel to address questions about pavement preservation at the local level. And we've put together some questions that we want to ask the panel, and have the panel stick to short answers because we've sort of run out of some time. But and then, of course, we can open it up to the audience for additional questions and follow on. So we're going to keep it pretty informal. One question that occurred to me based on Todd's conversation, and he addressed his perspective, but a question I have is, how can your DOTs help local agencies to improve their pavement preservation activities?
The Minnesota DOT is terrific. They allow their people to come out and look at our roads, give us suggestions, and we've had great success. Having worked with MnDOT before I came to the county, obviously gave me a connection and had some help there. But again, one of the things going to the county is they wanted a more diverse pavement program, and so by having the contacts with our DOT was just the way to do it.
I'm from Illinois, so most of you heard the Illinois DOT report yesterday stating that they're really just having a paradigm shift now. So I guess I would offer the local agency assistance to the DOT in Illinois. We've been doing pavement preservation for, gosh, I remember my dad was a county engineer seal coating. When I was 5 years old, I'd go out and watch the process. So we've been seal coating in Illinois for a very long time. We've done microsurfacing in Knox County for 20 years. So I guess rather than the DOTs in Illinois, rather than locals relying on DOTs in Illinois, you know, they can rely on us, would be the comment I would have to make.
In Iowa, actually the DOT is actually paid for and funded pavement distress data collection. 2 different rounds in Iowa for basically all the paved roads. So they've actually stepped up with funding to assist counties in trying to help them collect data, analyze data, and use that for decision making. I would say, I kind of echo a little bit of Duane's comments. There's some aspects of pavement preservation where probably counties were maybe ahead of what the DOT was doing as far as projects, types of projects, and then there's also things that obviously that we were behind on. But Iowa DOT basically has been a very strong advocate and a great resource. I would think that that would not change, and obviously, like I mentioned in my presentation, we actually use the Iowa DOT letting process for some of our maintenance work, and so it's really become a lot easier for counties to access additional funding. They just need to realize that that's available and go get it. So,
I'm with the Indiana LTAP, Local Technical Assistance Program, and so what we do is training and technical assistance and technology transfer to counties and cities and towns in Indiana. And we work a lot with our DOT on different training. We'll invite them to come and speak and talk about their pavement preservation activities, as well as the state legislators passed a $200 million grant program which required local agencies to have an asset management plan administered by NDOT. And then we at LTAP, we review and collect the asset management plan, so we're working in conjunction with the state DOT and working with them on, a lot of local agencies will submit grant projects for different preservation activities, and so we'll work back and forth on what are acceptable pavement preservation activities.
So I heard a number of different ways that local agencies are already working with their DOTs, or opportunities to cross-pollinate ideas. It's very interesting. Next, we'd like to hear about some of your biggest successes in local agency pavement preservation.
I've been a county engineer in Knox County for 20 years. I guess our biggest success story is Cape Seals. We've actually, last year we did a project 6 miles long. We did a Cape Seal, and we actually did the seal coat portion of the Cape Seal with our own forces. We have the equipment to do that, and we do that July and August. That's about all we do, is apply seal coats for ourselves, as well as the townships within Knox County. So I guess I would have to say our biggest success would be Cape Seals.
I'm Steve Branaau. I'm from Henry County. Actually, I'm retired. I was a county engineer for 36 years before that, but Henry County is a little bit unique. we had our own seal coat operations. We also had our own asphalt plant and paving operations. And I think one of our biggest successes is with our seal coat operations, extending the life of our pavements. We could do it on time when it needed to be, and that was a big success for us.
I'll duplicate that. Hennepin County, long before I came to Hennepin County, they were, if you overlaid a pavement, you'd crack seal it and then you'd seal coat it, and that has held the roads together in a really good shape. However, they stopped doing that about 20 years ago because of the windshield damage was part of it. Now it's been catch-up time, so a wheelage tax was passed and just some mill and overlays were really rushed out there because of the fact that we had to get the roads smooth again. So unfortunately though, like in 2019, our program consisted of 60 lane miles of overlay and 140 lane miles of crack sealing, and that was it. So I feel our best success for preservation is yet to come, because for 2020 we're going to have 70 lane miles of overlay, 30 lane miles of cold in place and full depth reclamation, 20 lane miles of chip seal, as long as the bids come in good, and then we're going to be adding microsurfacing this year.
In Indiana, so when I talk pavement preservation, I talk asset management as well, because a lot of the pavement preservation activity, one of the drums that we beat at the Indiana LTAP is to do a network, have an inventory, condition ratings, do a network level of analysis, have some goals on what your network level to achieve, and then set up a pavement management program from there, which starting at the top of the curve preservation activities. So one of the, I think the biggest successes that we've had in Indiana for local agencies is not necessarily in pavement preservation. They've been doing a lot of chip seals and crack seals for a long time, and pug mix, cold mix asphalt. With what I alluded to in my previous comment, in 2016, the legislators required asset management plans for this big grant program. And then the year after that, the other big funding source in Indiana is the motor vehicle highway account. The legislators wrote, we had a big gas tax increase in 2017, and they said that 50% of your funds from that fund have to go towards construction, reconstruction, and preservation. And they defined preservation of having an asset management plan. Now, over the last 3 years, we have 100% of our counties with complete inventory and condition ratings on a regular basis. 100% of our cities, 120 of our cities have complete inventory and condition ratings, and 347 of our 443 towns have complete inventory and condition ratings being repeated on a regular basis. Because it took us from 1985 to 2017, over 30 years to get a gas tax increase. So now collecting pavement condition data and financial data, we're hoping to be able to tell what that story will look like when the gas tax starts to drop off in the next few years.
I would say the biggest success that I've had is to create the priority for funding and make pavement preservation a annual planning and budgeting item for my county, just to make it, I guess it's mainstream now. So it's just something we discuss and budget for just like anything else.
It sounds like there's some great successes, but when we talk about successes, I think we also have to look at challenges. So the next question is, what are your greatest needs or challenges that you face in trying to improve your programs and practices? And some subtopics might be in training, in specifications, in guidelines, availability of contractors, and so on.
I would say for me, it's probably twofold. One would be training of inspectors that go out and inspect project work. And then the second thing really is we don't really do a good job of documenting and announcing our success and the benefits of the program. We sold the program and the planning and all that, and now I think we need to do a better job of documenting that and keep selling that or marketing that so it doesn't get pulled. So I think the big thing we need to do is, from my perspective, is train our inspectors, get them more familiar with the inspection on projects. And then two is to really kind of document and keep, I guess, kind of tooting your own horn just to show the benefit. So number one, so you can keep doing what you're doing. And number two, maybe people, there's going to be an effect around you from other counties on what you're doing. So
I think one of the biggest challenges we have is funding, obviously, and that's being helped a little bit. Illinois just had a gas tax increase, so that's going to help some of the funding issues. But I want to echo what Todd says about getting the word out. I think we as engineers sometimes don't promote our successes and don't promote our stuff well enough. And I think that we should get out there and blow our own horn a little bit more.
I think one of the challenges that I've seen is the asset management, getting all that in place. Several years ago, I actually bought a, software database from Michigan, LTAP, RoadSoft, and I learned about that through NACE, but I just didn't have the staffing to really concentrate on populating that database and getting the asset management data in there. I eventually had to abandon that because I was paying $900 a year, I think, user fee, and just wasn't using it. So I think that's really been my biggest challenge as far as pavement preservation, just getting the asset management set up to where I can, get a program. Right now, it's kind of a more reactive program than a proactive, and I'd like to fix that.
We heard a little bit about funding in Iowa from Todd, and some of the, we saw agencies that had dedicated funding or informal dedicated funding, I think was the term you used. And we know funding is an important issue. So the next question is, do you have funding for preservation? And if so, how does preservation funding stack up against other roadway funding activities?
I think my biggest challenge is funding. So again, that kind of answers the last question. But for funding right now, the way Hennepin County is funding is pretty much all of our pavement maintenance and preservation would come out of our operating budget. So I know last year I did take what we had in the program and shared with our bosses what that gave us. And we used the road resource website and showed the service life in years, what we were getting with what we were doing, and then showed what we could have gotten had we been doing other things. And I think that's one reason why we are getting some more treatments into the program this year.
In Clinton County, my roadway maintenance budget, so this would just be surface road maintenance, not culverts or bridges or whatever. So it's about $3 million, and approximately 15% of that is spent on pavement preservation. I mentioned the farm to market funds is the road use tax, but it's a fund administered by the state. About 10% of that is spent on pavement preservation.
Yeah, funding is definitely a challenge. Right now, we concentrate our motor fuel tax funding on pavement preservation activities. And as was mentioned yesterday, Illinois has recently passed a gas tax increase. They doubled it, but we're going to realize about a 65 to 70% increase in our funding. That really only gets us back to funding levels where we were 20 years ago. And we've talked about your buying power. So I don't know. I think we're catching up, but we're not ahead. Most of my federal dollars are spent on the larger reconstruction project. Yeah, my local funds as well as MFT is pretty much the money I've got to spend.
So the next question is about treatments, and we've heard in the treatments and the presentations about some of the typical treatments that are being used: crack sealing, microsurface, chip seal. There were a few others mentioned. What sort of innovative treatments are you using that maybe are not run-of-the-mill, or what sort of treatments that you aren't using are you thinking about trying out within your agencies?
In Indiana, a lot of counties are using a pug mix or cold mix asphalt. They recycle their own asphalt, get millings from a contractor on another job, and then they recycle it, and they're getting a lot of success out of that. Something I'm not sure if Todd's familiar, if it's part of his county or not, but auto seals is something I've read a lot about lately that I'd like to do some more research on.
So we're looking at doing auto seals. Basically, I would call it it's a chip seal. They say chip seal on steroids, a chip seal using roadstone, a chip seal basically at a higher oil shot rate, and you use basically just like a Class A, like a regular roadstone, and it's got a significant amount of compaction over an extended period. So it's simple to do. There's obviously you need to put it on the right roads as candidate, and again that comes from a couple of kind of 2 or 3 other county engineers in Iowa have done that, so I'm trying to steal from them. And then another thing I want to look at doing for the roads that basically have too much cracking to do crack seal, but I don't really want to pay for a full scrub seal. There's a county engineer that does a sand seal, and he hires a contractor with an applicator to come out and shoot the oil on the road. I think he uses a cutback And then he uses his own dump truck with sand and like a sander you would have for salt sand application for wintertime, and he just backs down the road and puts it on there. He does that himself for very inexpensive, and I've seen pictures, I've seen cords that he's cut, and he actually gets pretty good penetration into the crack to seal the cracks, and it's a very low dollar application to kind of pick up those roads that maybe you don't really want to spend the money to crack seal because it's because of the density of the cracks. So
Then the basic chip seal, microsurface, things like that. We've done Texas under seals now. The other thing, we have 2 test projects with putting the rejuvenator in the mix. So we've worked with 2 different companies, and we worked with our partners, MnDOT, to get those done. Of course, they were placed in 17 and 18, so we're looking to see if we need a little more time to see if the results will prove beneficial.
The funding increase, I would like to maybe try a project recycling either cold in place or hot in place. Haven't really decided which way to go yet. We've actually done some cold in place recycling ourselves. Pretty informal process, dump some rock on the road and till it in, relay it and seal coat it. But some of my hot mixes need a little more than that, so I think that's what I'm going to focus on in the coming years with the new funding.
We have done some cold in place recycling, and we've had good success with that. It's not innovative, but that's been some of our treatments. It's worked.
Tied into that, Trudy, you mentioned doing some new treatments and having to wait a couple years to see how those impact your program. So the next question is, what systems are you using to track the performance of your pavement preservation treatments? What triggers do you use that might come out of those systems to address the timing of the next treatment?
Well, for tracking, we weren't quite sure exactly how to track the research because we haven't done that much of it. I know we're going out and visually observing it. We're getting ride ratings on it. And then I know on a couple of the projects, MnDOT has come out and had their skid resistant, and then they've done some retroreflectivity on the pavement markings on those. So again, we're just trying to document things, and then we're trying to just keep kind of a running summary of text going on that, knowing that it's going to be a couple years before any results really will prove anything.
In Indiana, about 90% of the local agencies are using PASER condition ratings to look at how the treatments are, the effectiveness they're getting out of the treatments. There's some using PCI, and then there's a couple using combination of PASER and a roughness index. Not necessarily IRI, but there's a couple manufacturers with your phones, you can get a roughness index, so they're using that to help prioritize when they do their projects.
We're pretty informal, so we used to do visual inspections and track it with paper in the file, and also with the county engineer's head, looking at it each year, and more often than that, just trying to get ride qualities and keep tracking it that way.
Have you had any failures, and what did you learn from them, and what have you done to avoid failures in the future?
Seal coats, in the 30 years I've been involved in applying seal coats, the one thing I've learned is there's so much I don't know about seal coats. It's such a variable, you got oil and you got chips. Sometimes they're not compatible, and if they're not compatible, you can lay the chips in the oil and they just don't stick at all. We've had some situations where that has happened. One winter of snow plowing, you got 75% of your chips are gone. That makes us look bad. Yeah, be aware of situations like that.
We did have an early failure. We had a paving operation, and we tried to do a sand seal through our paver, and that didn't work. It's probably a mixed design problem that we had, but we ended up scraping up all of our work that we put down because it was deforming and causing problems.
I don't know if I would classify this as a pavement preservation failure, but we did a project where we tried an inner layer over a PCC pavement. It wasn't a proprietary one, it was just a change in the mix design. So normally we would crack and seat PCC pavement and then just do an overlay. Well, in order to mitigate some potential reflective cracking, we did the same process where you crack the pavement, seeded it, and then we put this inner layer down, a 1 inch thick inner layer, and we put 4 inches of hot mix over that. It actually cracked sooner than what we would typically expect. It didn't perform the way we wanted to. Different issues with the elastic recovery testing and I guess the quality of the inner layer binder. But anyway, So we tried something, it didn't work, so the next year we tried something different.
We know one of the big problems in areas where there are utilities is applying pavement treatments and then the utility coming in the next year and tearing up the road. Have you had any success working with local utilities to impact the roadway once by combining projects or by coordinating timing?
Good news is Hennepin County's had great success working with CenterPoint. Often they'll be coming in like on a 4-lane road and having to work in the northbound center lane, and so they'll be reconstructing the northbound lanes. We haven't been able to get a full reconstruct on our southbound lanes, but we will have their contractor then overlay those, and so we've been partnering and working on projects there. We're hoping to get to the point we can actually get the funding in place and do the full reconstruct together. We did get to do the full reconstruct with our Metropolitan Council on Environmental Services, and actually we're getting a new road for very little money because they had to go right down the center of the road. So we have been working to do that. And I know Hennepin County developed a utilities integration map, and we're asking all utilities and cities to put that on the map as well. And so we can have like a 5-year program to see who's doing what and try to coordinate.
I was just going to say no.
I will add, we are planning a full-depth reclamation on a county road that borders Carver County to our southwest, and we found out that they have money budgeted in '22. Our money's in 2020, so they'll be doing their road a couple years right after ours. Unfortunately, we didn't plan far enough ahead to really get that coordinated.
I would say utility companies are like railroads. They're impossible to work with.
I've got plenty more questions, but I wonder if there are any questions for the panel from the audience. We have a few minutes left. Questions that you've been dying to ask them.
I'm with the Illinois DOT in the east central part of the state. Have any of you guys done any cold central plant recycling? We've got a lot of low volume state routes, unmarked routes. We're considering doing a process with using either existing millings at some of our asphalt plants, because over the years we've got some mountains of millings growing at our asphalt plants, and possibly using a central recycling process to put that out on some unmarked low volume state routes that need some more structure, or even taking millings off of some roadways, cold central recycling those and putting them back out there. Has anybody got any experience with that? I know Indiana's trying to do some on some state routes, I know, getting started, but any experience with any of that?
In Clinton County, we've been doing cold in place since the late 80s. We pretty much do some every year, but we have never done the central plant stuff. It's always just that on the road, on the train recycling. So I'd be interested to see how that works, but we don't have any stockpiles.
Just sort of what I mentioned in my previous comments, there's a good dozen counties or so in Indiana that are have their own kind of central plant, their own pug mix, they call it, pug mill, where they're doing that. But I can't speak. I'm not that intimately involved in that. I just know that they're doing it.
The county to our west, Wright County, is doing one starting today that I'm not there to observe. I can see if I can get any information from them for you.
The Minroad and NCAT partnership just finished some recycling experiments on the city street going into Minroad, probably a little over Million Easel Road. So they did cold in place or cold central plant with both an emulsion and a foam. The material was sized. It was a nice, probably 9.5 millimeter type wrap, so it was processed, and the test sections came out well, and we put a 1-inch overlay on all of that. We also did cold in place recycling with emulsion and foam and some stabilized fold up reclamation. So we've got a lot of new test sections on a lower volume pavement.
Somehow we've managed to end up just about on time. Please join me with a big hand for these volunteers. Did an excellent job on the panel.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.